What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Aftermath, where John Sheeran and myself break down what happened a little bit further in detail than our regular post-game report, just giving you all kinds of different analysis, opinions, and everything as it pertains to the Cincinnati Bengals. John Sheeran, we were finally privy to witnessing a win for the first time since, January?
The Bills.
They didn't win the preseason. Yeah. So it's been a little while since we've been able to talk about it, and you, sir, are a lucky man because you were at the game. Tell us a little bit about the atmosphere there for those of us who have major FOMO, not fear of missing out, not being there. So how was it, man?
It was very similar, very reminiscent of the Dolphins game last year for obvious reasons. You had the whiteout again. Felt like that college atmosphere. Chris Fowler was calling the game, so it was really a college atmosphere, I guess, for people who got to listen to the ESPN broadcast. It was great. It was obviously a sellout. Everyone was there for the Ring of Honor too. I have a story about that they'll probably share with the mic drop. But no, it was rocking, definitely. I think there was definitely some tension in the air just because of their being 0-2, and I heard a lot more boo birds than I would have cared to admit. Yeah, especially early in the game. I think there was still resentment and still not resentment, but a lot of anxiety about what the game could have led to, and the game itself could have probably went ugly really fast had a certain ankle not went out of bounds on one of the opening plays of the game. But I think we've kind of seen this before. This is their sixth consecutive primetime win at home, which is still insane to say out loud. And the atmosphere was
including the playoffs, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Hey, stark difference in primetime and the performances in them by this Zach Taylor team as opposed to Marvin Lewis, Andy Dalton and company in those big moments. But look, I mean, there's a lot to criticize. There's a lot to question. But there's also, hey, this was as close to a week 3 must-win type of situation as you could get for a team like the Bengals and the expectations that they are holding. So in a way, while there's a lot to criticize, a lot to kind of be worried about, you're also relieved and you are happy as a Bengals fan and as a Bengals player this week, kind of saying, wow, we just really needed that one. And maybe this is a little bit of a gut check win, so to speak. Sometimes I think I may have hinted at this a little bit last night, but if not, I'll reiterate. Sometimes when you're a team that is struggling, sometimes when you are a team that things aren't going all that well, your stars maybe aren't playing up to standards, the wins aren't coming. This is the type of win that you just grind out all the way to the very, very end. Then, you're kind of white knuckling it until those triple zeros hit at the fourth quarter there. Sometimes this is the type of win you need to really turn things around in your season.
Yeah, I think it was E.J. Reader who said on his way to the locker room, getting back on track and whatever form that takes, I guess, that they will definitely take. I think also just their track record in September, in the first few weeks of the season, it's been a lot of games like this where they haven't won, and eventually, they have been able to pull it out. But it's these games that you need in week 1 and 2 when Your offense is still clearly finding themselves, or whatever new and fresh adversity they're going to face next year, whatever. It's games like this where they have to look back and think, yeah, like it may not be pretty, and a lot of things will go wrong, but some part of the team's gonna have to pick up the other part. And at tonight, it was just the defense in usual fashion, I should say, for the past couple of years, really showing out and really giving the offense every single chance. But when your team is imperfect, whether it's injuries or whatever the issue may be, it's games like this that you need to find a way to win. Because if they didn't, we would be talking about the opportunities that they just left a plenty on the field and how they didn't win. So obviously, this is the better alternative of these two realities. And at the same time, we can still now objectively look at what are the things that are still plaguing this team. What are the things that will plague them against opponents who will take advantage of some of the weaknesses a little bit better than the Los Angeles Rams when it's not White Tiger night in prime time in their home stadium. Like the circumstances and the scenarios are only going to get tougher from here on out, and they really need to find some stability and consistency going forward.
So, this is a little bit of I give some opinions on the post game report, but this aftermath episode is really about a lot of your opinions, a little bit more of mine sprinkled in here, and it's a roundtable discussion of sorts here, especially with a win like this. And for those watching the video at the bottom, we have a little banner of a topic there, and it says encouraged or fool's gold with the win. So I am encouraged in a lot of different ways because there are semblances of rhythm in the passing game, albeit a dink and dunk type of situation, and small bits of yardage here and there. So I'm seeing much more improvement and a lot more rhythm in the passing game in a lot of different ways than 2 weeks ago. So in that respect, I am encouraged. I am questioning, I think we had Jake Ellenbogen, who does a great job with Turf Show Times and all kinds of different stuff covering the Rams. He kind of felt like this Rams team was a lot better than a lot of people were giving them credit for. And I think they've got some nice players here and there, but to me, this wasn't a world-beating Los Angeles Rams team. So I waver here where I go, hey, I'm encouraged because there are some semblances of progress being made from early this season, but I also waver, John, because was this just right opponent, right time? Was it actually a high quality win? Do we take them as we get them at this point? All of these kind of things start going through my mind here. Of course you take the win how you get it. There's just some warning signs that aren't fully disappearing quite yet, which is alarming.
Yeah, like the number one encouraging thing is that Joe Burrow's calf is not worse than it was this time last week. Of course, yeah. Right? I found we're just at a point where you have Dan Orlovsky saying this is the best case scenario for the Bengals. They won and their quarterback's healthy. It's the best case scenario for 32 NFL teams, right? Because nothing's more important than the health of the quarterback. But of course, he went into this game not knowing with 100% certainty if a repeat of what last week happened was going to happen again, and he made it through 50 plus dropbacks and was fine. He took some hits because, of course, Aaron Donald is going to beat Cordell Volson a handful of times, and that's exactly what happened. Regardless of your feelings of Cordell Volson, like that's a reality that every team in that situation has to take. Also encouraging, this defense took a lot of criticism for the first 2 weeks. I personally felt that they were due just to have maybe an off week or two because the offense just hasn't picked up the slack. And they looked dominant in ways that they usually do, right? They are very sack heavy in terms of just converting pressures to sacks. In terms of stopping in the red zone, they were 1 for 4 there. So they held the Rams to be 1 for 4 there, starting with just the first one, right? You have a touchdown called back and immediately leads to a DJ Reader sack, and you force a field goal. You have Trey Hendrickson lighting the world on fire against the backup left tackle, a matchup that he should win, right? Last week, he went up against Patrick McCarry, the Ravens' backup left tackle, and he had very little success because the Bengals had no idea how to pressure or not pressure Lamar Jackson. This time, it's Matthew Stafford, who is aging and has always been kind of suspect when he deals with pressure, and they just realized that, and they just let him loose, and he had a career game. He looked like Myles Garrett out there. You had plenty of players on the defense have really solid games. Dax Hill, Logan Wilson, we can get into all those guys who impressed. So the encouraging sign is the defense is not like, it was definitely some overreaction with, oh, is this defense like starting to regress, or is it washed? I don't think that was the case. And obviously Burrow being but just not being worse in terms of health, because he's clearly still got a ways to go, and that definitely looked to be the case. And that is where you kind of look at, okay, he's fine, but he's not actually fine. And then on offense, I guess the only encouraging thing that I can say is if they really want to get Jamar Chase involved, like, they will find other ways to do it. And I think motioning him more, especially on running plays, and just getting any sort of pre-snap motion while the snap is happening, just to confuse or just pause the defense just for a split second, I think that was a positive evolution. And just getting him out into space more often and generating an explosive play with him, like that's objectively encouraging to see. And everything else is like, yeah, it's more of in a wait and see period right now.
Yeah, Tim Lyons in the Facebook chat says, did love all the motions they put Jamar in. I played this last night in case you didn't see it, and I know it's probably about 1:30 or 2 a.m. for some of you out there. This was one of my favorite plays on offense, probably their most explosive one. I mean, if you want to consider the touchdown run by Joe Mixon as the most explosive, you can. But this is, I think, to your point here, John, they do the fake toss out, and then a nice play to Jamar Chase. I think that was, 30, 35 yards. But that's the kind of creative stuff that they worked on this week, that getting him the ball more, that I think that, he kind of made some comments openly in the media, did Chase, about getting the ball more and getting the ball downfield to him more. So they did find some and make a concerted effort to do so on that. I'm seeing a lot of stuff in our live chats, a couple, I talked about this. I didn't want to go here, and a lot of, I didn't want to go far into this because I don't know how much I buy into it necessarily, but there's, he got blanked in week 1 on 8 targets against Cleveland, and the Cleveland defensive backs we know are very good and match up well against the Bengals receivers. Had a nice rebound game in week 2, did T. Higgins. And then last night had 3 drops, at least 2. I think 3 drops, one of which was on a 3rd and long that he would have converted on a pretty critical time of the game. So, I mean, of course, questions like this rightfully come up, but from Christopher Crowley in our live chat, do you have any concern about T. Higgins' contract situation? Is there just a distraction there? Are you pressing too much? All of that is, goes through your mind because, you're working for that next contract, and he's a young player. He's human. This is the kind of stuff that comes through your mind. But I don't know. I tend to think it's just maybe a little bit of hangover rust from the summer, not getting the snaps in the games and all that kind of stuff. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe the contract's playing into it. You and I have a soft spot for him. He's been kind to our show. He's been on it, and great guy, $1 million smile, great player. And so, obviously we all wish the best for him, but I mean, there have been 2 out of the first 3 games have been a struggle for T. Higgins this year.
I think personally, I think it's irresponsible for anyone in our position to just say that, yeah, like the contract is the main reason why he's not performing up to snuff, or maybe he's looking distracted, right? Like, I think it's up to him to either admit that, like Jesse Bates did in the middle of the 2021 season. And if that does end up being the case, from what I know, like, Higgins loves to be here, and he would still love to be here, and that agreement's either going to come or it's not. But I'm not comfortable saying that that's like definitely the reason, or it's enough to just speculate, just because like we saw him look his old self against the Ravens, right? He was the main reason why they ended up being in that game. The drops are uncharacteristic. Like, T. Higgins doesn't normally drop passes, so players can have off games. We literally just saw Trey Hendrickson have one of the worst games I've ever seen him play against the Ravens, and then look like, again, like one of the best players at this position a week later. So the stuff kind of happens. Obviously, with the contract situation being what it is, it's easy to kind of speculate, but I don't feel comfortable doing that just yet until we have more information about it.
Yeah. It's just of course, when this kind of situation happens, that's a talking point. But I wouldn't say that's the reason why. It's just a talking point that does come up, unfortunately. But I think he's going to be fine. Just a rough night, and yeah, the score may have been a little bit different had he made a couple of those catches, but he didn't, and the Bengals still won, and that's good news there. But I mean, overall, I think there's a lot to be happy about, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, John. And the defense, as you mentioned, Trey Hendrickson played like a man possessed last night. And I got to tell you, I am really, really pleased with the first 3 starts from Dax Hill. I am seeing a lot of things from him, and it's physicality, it's support in the run, it's getting his hands on the football and making an interception in that first week. I mean, he has played very, very well through these first 3 weeks as a collective set of games. And then you've got Hendrickson doing work up front. Hubbard finally, kind of started coming alive in this one a little bit too. So the defense just really, really came to play. And quite honestly, I mean, I know that the Bengals offense scored and, we're completing far more passes than they were earlier this year. But I mean, this really, I think, came down to Evan McPherson kicking really long field goals and the defense playing very, very well.
Yeah, for sure. That defensive line for the Bengals, it had a clear mismatch against the Rams offensive line. It's not the same unit. It is almost like the inverse of what the Super Bowl was, right? It was the Rams offensive line this time that was very, very overwhelmed, and the Rams offense couldn't do enough to overcome that. So all those guys won their battles and their matchups as they were expected to do. They're very highly paid. They're very good at what they do. And this was a matchup for them to kind of tee off. And it didn't really start until really kind of the second half, because Dax Hill had, like you mentioned, he's the only one, by the way, on this defense that has an interception, a tackle for loss, and the sack. If you want to talk about who on this defense is the Swiss Army knife, who's wearing the most hats, who's lining up in the most the most amount of different alignments, it's Dax Hill, right? The box score stats don't always translate to how a player is doing, but it's not super shocking that he's the only one who qualifies in all 3 of those categories. But he's playing fast, and I think the more he does play, the more comfortable he plays. But that speed and explosion is there, and it's an asset that the Bengals have not had in the secondary, despite how good the secondary has been in recent years. It's not something that they've had in the back 7 in quite some time. They've had Logan Wilson for a couple of years now, but he played, as usual, phenomenal in coverage. I think that first interception where Stafford was kind of side-arming it and he stepped in front of Van Jefferson, that was so impressive. Again, to have the ability to drop back into that deep Tampa 2 shell, to flip your hips, to read the quarterback's eyes, and then make a play on the ball. It's everything. It's everything for why the Bengals paid him what they did as a linebacker, a position that they rarely play, because he is a modern-day linebacker, and he's exactly what the Bengals defense has needed for so long. And so this game, though, like, by the end of the first half, I'm thinking to myself, this is like watching the Jets. It's a defense that's just dominant. It's suffocating. It's making great plays, and the offense is just leaving them out to dry. And I'm happy for the defense's sake that the offense finally got their stuff together a little bit in the second half, and that the defense continued to stay alive, because it would have been a shame to waste that performance. 6 sacks, 2 interceptions in one game does not happen a lot, and it would have been a shame if that happened in the loss.
Do you buy that? Because I've been holding on to this opinion that part of the reason of the defensive struggles, there's been some sloppy tackling here and there and that sort of thing, but they have just been rushed out there so quickly and over again. And now the Bengals, even though it didn't always equate to points, they had more sustained drives just because of the dink and dunk passing and kind of methodically moving down the field a bit more in this one, as opposed to 3 plays, 2 yards punt, 3 plays, 2 yards punt. I feel like that kind of allowed, and maybe again, like you said, better matchup on the offensive defensive line, between them there, just a better matchup maybe. And they took advantage of some things as well. But I do think the offense, even though they weren't scoring points and even though they were failing to get in the end zone and all that kind of stuff a bit more, I do think some of the drives went a little longer to be able to give them a little bit more of a spell this week, as opposed to just boom, you're out there again, boom, you're out there again. And they're just gassed. A lot of snaps being taken and everything.
Yeah, that was the biggest problem in week 1, just because they had like no first downs to speak of against the
Right,
Browns.
right.
And eventually the defense is going to wear it down. And it was a little bit better against the Ravens because the offense started to look like its old self in the second half. But I don't know, man. Like in the first half, they had 3 points for the first 29 minutes, and then Evan McPherson kicked a long field goal to end it and to give him 6 points. Like Brad Robbins still had a busy night. They didn't sustain a lot of drives necessarily, and they consistently put themselves in second and long and third and long. Yeah, Tim Lyons, they did compare him to the Jets. Did you see them out there for most of the game? Like, yeah, obviously Joe Burrow is better than Zach Wilson, but this was the first time that the Bengals have won a game in which Joe Burrow has had a passer rating of less than 80. It's actually his second worst passer rating performance in his career, and his worst one was against the Browns. It was 59.8. And sometimes passer rating doesn't always tell the full story because it leaves out rushing yards, it leaves out, some context in terms of moving the chains and whatnot. It pretty much told the full story this night. Like, obviously, Burrow and his footwork, it's still not what it needs to be because he's dealing with that calf. The mobility and extending plays is not where it needs to be. That in itself is eliminating so many opportunities for explosive plays. And it's literally what he said after the game. That's how those opportunities are created when your quarterback is able to get out of the pocket and extend plays and hold the ball longer. Those things are still limiting this offense in itself. And injury or not, the quarterback and his limitations right now, his physical limitations, it's just handicapping the offense a lot, and that's just what we saw for most of the game.
Yeah. We are gonna talk a little bit about who impressed, who didn't, and some worrisome areas. I've got some areas of concern going forward here, and some of them are statistical as a team, some of them are individual, but we'll talk about that in just a second. If you're new here, welcome. We appreciate you checking us out, part of the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, along with Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, Matt Minnick's Coach Speak and Chalk Talk, as well as 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin. We call this show the Orange and Black Insider. He is John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. We've been doing this for a little while now, just a little while. He and I having a lot of fun doing it. We bring you a handful of episodes every week, including a game preview, the occasional listener questions live, which we're going to try and do this week at the end of the week, as well as this show, the Aftermath, a post-game report, and a Thursday night, like I said, kind of a preview long form episode. And we do some creative stuff, at least on occasion, whether it's on the shorts or narrative videos, that sort of thing. We do some stuff on our YouTube channel that is exclusive there. So you're going to want to click the show icon beneath John and beneath that Cincy Jungle icon there. Click that to subscribe. Click the bell to be notified to when we go live and when new stuff's available for you to check out on that YouTube channel. Give a thumbs up to the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. Go to cincyjungle.com for news, opinions, analysis, podcasts, all kinds of stuff on the Cincinnati Bengals. And also go check out what my guy John is doing at A2ZSports.com, killing it over there. We appreciate all the support, and it's always good to see. We've got a lot of people in the live chats and stuff, so good to see all of you. Thank you for joining us 2 nights in a row. We appreciate it. Let's talk about this. Is kind of a weekly standard on this one for the Aftermath. Who impressed and who didn't? It's easy to start if we're going to go. If we're going to start with the negative, it's easy to go with this one from Mr. Whisper. You talked about it a little bit. And thank you for the super chat. If you are also inclined and want to make sure that your comment gets on the show and or top priority, particularly when we do listener questions live and stuff, we accept these super chats. Most of the time, we've been giving them to charitable stuff from special guests that come on our show, but we appreciate the support. Nonetheless, obviously, Mr. Whisper talking about Cordell Volson and his double goose egg pass block rating per PFF 0.0. And of course, noting that Joe Burrow threw 50 times, unacceptable. That cannot happen. You are correct. But again, it is Aaron Donald. So there's a little bit of a pass here in that regard. But I'm feeling like this offensive line, for the most part, is playing a lot better than years past. So I have some concern there with Volson kind of standing out, I guess, at this point as the guy who I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how you want to word that, but he's standing out for the wrong reasons among this group of five. And last night, and that 0.0 pass block rating is not good.
Yeah, I mean he's clearly the lesser of the five starters, and any defensive coordinator with a brain with Aaron Donald saying, "Yeah, you're lining up against this guy for the entire game, and you're gonna take what you can get." And he ended up getting, I think, 6 pressures and a couple hits on the quarterback. It, it, oh man, this is why it's like when Joe Mixon is saying that this guy is going to be a future Hall of Famer, and Ted Karras is saying, this guy is just built different and everything. It's like, yeah, it's all great and everything. He was still, a little bit subpar as a rookie, and it's hard to go from subpar to really good in just a year, regardless of if you're an older player who's a young player in the league, regardless of anything, work ethic and blue collar background and all those things. Wilson was always kind of a limited player, and you can't be a limited player and expect to shut out Aaron Donald for an entire game. I know people look at the grade and think, okay, he had no positive plays. That's not true. It's not how the PFF grade is calculated. He officially had like 5 pressures allowed, a couple of hits, pass blocking efficiency of 94. Still not great. 0.0 is reflected into how bad the negative plays were and what they led to in terms of EPA and all that stuff. Yeah, it wasn't good. It's not time to just say bench Volson or anything. I'm not saying anyone is saying that, but like the 0.0 grade looks terrible, obviously, and it was a bad game, but it's like, yeah, there's some context to it,
Yeah, for sure. On the flip side, though, like I said, I think the rest of the offensive line, Jonah Williams played pretty well last night. There was a clip that Joe Goodberry put on the his Twitter account of I didn't catch it in the game, but it was of Orlando Brown ducking behind in front of Joe Burrow to give him a lane to throw, and that was something I was thinking about. And we talk about how these first couple of weeks have been about these last couple of seasons. The first couple of games have been about, man, a lot of new guys getting acclimated, all this kind of stuff. Orlando Brown Jr. is like 6'8". Jonah Williams, who has played left tackle, is like 6'4", 6'5". So that is an additional 3 inches. And Joe Burrow's not a small guy. I think he's 6'3", 6'4". That is a player that, as the line moves and potentially gets in your line of sight, that's a pretty big difference to adjust to as a quarterback as well, sight line wise, getting a passing lane, that sort of thing. If you're talking about 3 or 4 inches of height from your tackle, that's an adjustment, especially, even with all the practices and all this kind of stuff in the game, that can look different at game speed. So, I mean, that's something as well that perhaps is one of the many things that this team continues to acclimate to. But I still think Orlando Brown Jr. has been good the first 3 weeks. I thought Jonah Williams played pretty well last night. And so I think while there are a lot of things to work on, and we can point out this ugly pass block rating score for Volson, I think there's still some good signs of optimism overall for the offensive line, particularly after this week.
Yeah, I think both Brown and Williams have been they've both been fine. Like I think Williams has been charged with a couple sacks so far, but in terms of just their per snap production, I think they've been relatively equal, and they had really good matchups tonight. Again, the Rams don't have literally anything at edge, so this was something that they were supposed to win. And I think
they have Jonah Williams.
They do have Jonah Williams. I didn't hear the other Jonah Williams' name, maybe once or twice, but yeah, colossal matchup there. But I think the Bengals' confidence in the offensive line is partly why they had Burrow quote unquote dropping back 50 times. We need to talk about that though, because there's kind of some ignorance with it. 50 dropbacks is not the same as like 50 dropbacks as a blanket statement. It lacks a ton of nuance, right? Obviously, Burrow gets the ball out quickly, and not all passing plays involve him going through multiple full field reads and putting him in harm's way of pass rushes. We've seen in recent years the Bengals like to have an extension of the run game with the passing game. Part of that is with RPOs. There was a lot of called RPOs that Burrow pulled the ball back, ended up throwing, and again, the ball gets out within 1 or 2 seconds at the absolute most. There's obviously a lot of quick passes in general. It's not putting Burrow back there 50 times with 5-step, 7-step drops against Aaron Donald and asking him to hold the ball for long periods of time. 50 dropbacks in this case is just take the snap, look for a couple seconds, throw the ball. Like, it's not the best offense right now. Obviously, the results kind of speak for themselves, but the narrative that the Bengals put Burrow in harm's way and completely lacked the situational awareness of his calf situation and ask him to have this full game of work with that, I think is very misleading with what actually happened in this game. And also, it would be great. It would be phenomenal if the Bengals could hand the ball off to Joe Mixon 30 times and him average 5, 6, 7 yards per carry, and every single carry goes that distance. It's not what it was. It's not what it was last night. But at halftime, he had 7 carries for 23 yards. Like, he had a great drive in the third quarter when they ran the ball, like, I think 4 times for 29 yards, ended up with a 16-yard touchdown. It would be perfect if the Bengals could just do that all game. They can't, especially not when they're in shotgun all the time. It's easier to run the ball and make it more efficiently when you diversify it. And right now they're just stuck in shotgun because they can't have their quarterback drop back from under center. It's just the way things are right now. It's not them putting Burrow in harm's way like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting nuance you bring up about, 50 drop. It's not 50 right under center.
Exactly.
5, 7-step drops where he's planning over and over and over on that calf. That's not what this was. There were 50 pass attempts. That doesn't mean, it's 50 huge dropbacks or deep drops, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a good nuance you bring up there. And yeah, look, we've seen Burrow operate out of the shotgun and out of this particular, spread offense where he kind of eagle eyes everything, right? Where he can kind of survey and he doesn't have to do the dropbacks, and he operates well out of this. Now, unfortunately, sometimes it's kind of like last night where it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's 3-yard passes. It's crossers to Tanner Hudson that get you 5 yards. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily the prettiest or explosive sometimes, but if it's methodical and it can get you points, sometimes it works. Here's another area of concern for me, though, John. This is kind of continuing. And again, on the positive side, we have seen this offense evolve. We have seen it change to be a productive unit. We know it's there. Jamar Chase, 12 catches, 140 plus yards last night. So the production can be there. But this is still reminding me, even with the offensive line playing a little bit better, this is still reminding me of the last 2 postseason runs in the offense there. It's setting Evan McPherson up for these long field goals. It's just getting past midfield. You're settling for field goals in general instead of touchdowns. Granted, you're not turning over the ball over and over and over, which is great. And, you're in the game. It's a competitive game, but it's very reminiscent to me of the last 2 postseason runs where the Bengals were settling for field goals way more than they should have. And ultimately that's what cost them a championship and a shot at another one.
We have to bring up explosive plays again, because until they start generating them consistently, this leads into Burrow dropping back or throwing as much as he is, because if you can't move the ball more than just maybe like 4 or 5 yards at a time, which at a point was just their passing offense a little bit, it's going to lead to long drives, and it's going to leave the drives that get stalled out at the 50 or at the 40. And then you have Evan McPherson trotting out for 4 50-yard field goals a game, right? The drives just become so much easier when you can not only push the ball down the field, but you can extend plays and find the soft spots in these zones. And then those explosive plays come from there. It comes from yards after catch. It comes from the magic plays that Joe Burrow usually makes when he's fully healthy. They're just not there right now. So you're at a point where if the Bengals start the ball or start the drive, behind their own 30, it's almost like it needs to be like a 15-play drive in order to get into touchdown range. And so much bad stuff can happen. Like Joe Burrow threw, I think, a fine pass to Tyler Boyd, and the cornerback just jumped over Tyler Boyd and intercepted it with one hand. Like,
that was an incredible play. Yeah,
that was an amazing interception. Yeah. You want to talk about who impressed? That cornerback impressed me just with one play.
Witherspoon, right? Wasn't it Witherspoon who made it?
Yeah, that was crazy. But I mean, you need. It's harsh, but you need more efficient quarterback play. I don't know if it's just the calf that's bothering his footwork, but there were just uncharacteristic misses from Burrow in this game, whether short or deep. And I think they did kind of get to a point where like, okay, we're just going to just try these deep concepts just to see if they work. And none of them did work until they had Jamar Chase, wide open. T. Higgins caught pass, but he was rightfully called for offensive pass interference. So they're just trying a lot of things right now, and they're just not getting the best play from their quarterback, and that's going to lead to long drives. It's going to lead to a lot of passing attempts, unfortunately, and it just requires them to play perfectly. And right now, they're just not.
Yeah, and I think to me, it's a myriad of factors. It's Burrow's calf. And then, when you start to get a little bit of a rhythm, you have an uncharacteristic T. Higgins drop, you have an OPI penalty, you have something else pop up where you go, oh man, and then all of a sudden your drive that was looking kind of promising stalls out for a variety of reasons. So I don't think it's one thing. I don't think it's one player. I think it's a myriad of factors, but I do think that, as we've seen, they get it going later in the year. I mean, the first, even after the first two games last year, it was still a little bit of a painful process on the offensive side of the ball last year. I mean, it took them into that kind of the early middle stretch of the season to really start looking like the team where, you're throttling the Panthers and, you're beating up on the Falcons and that sort of thing. That was more middle-ish of the season. And maybe that's just what we need to expect. The preseason deal where you don't play and then the injury, all this stuff. I mean, that plays into it. And we're talking about week 3 here. Again, I'm still seeing progress, although it may be marginal overall. I'm seeing a lot, maybe not marginal from week 1. Week 1 was just horrific, but from last week to this week, I would say there's maybe some marginal progress, but overall, I think it's just going to take a little more time.
Yeah. If you were to tell me that, if Burrow's going to play and he just clearly wasn't 100%, this game was going to have to be low scoring. It was going to take a phenomenal performance from the defense for all 4 quarters. It was going to take Jamar Chase stepping up, and it's going to take more evolution and more creativity to get him more involved and just carrying parts of the team that are just unfortunately not clicking on all cylinders. It's going to take Aaron Donald not completely ruining the game, and all those things happened, and it led to a 3-point win. So kudos to them for actually doing that. There's definitely encouraging things to take away. There's also some big moments that I think maybe are going to go unnoticed, because the offense was stalling for quite some time in the first half, and Tanner Hudson, shout out to him, who was starting in this game for Irv Smith, catches a seam route down the middle, an actual positive play down the field, sets up the field goal to end the first half. Even I'll give credit to Joe Burrow for this one. Like, he gets hit very hard against Aaron Donald. The whole stadium gasped, by the way, when he went down. He was down there for like a couple seconds. Immediately the next play, he hits a slant to Chase. Chase makes a great catch behind his body. It sets up a touchdown to Joe Mixon a few plays later. Right. So there were definitely some plays where they were hit with some diversity and they bounced back immediately. And those are just the plays that they need to make if not everything is firing on all cylinder right now.
Yeah, that throw to Chase where it's kind of behind him, it actually was even though it looked like it was like, man, that's not a great throw, it actually was kind of wise because there was another defensive back coming in front of him that could have undercut that a little bit across the middle. So yeah, that's a good point there. Victor Pate, thank you so much for the super chat there. We see you commenting on our videos and checking it out. We appreciate the support, Victor. You are awesome. Let's kind of start wrapping up a little bit here and talk about what's ahead for the Bengals. They have a stretch of games coming up here where, you had hoped that they would have come out of the gates at least a tiny bit better, maybe be 2-1 like the rest of their division and have a division win under their belt, but that's not the case. So now they have a conference game coming up this week. And then, a couple of other interesting interconference games coming up in the next couple of weeks here. But a winnable stretch before the week 7 bye, John, is coming. We've got the Tennessee Titans coming up here, in which the Bengals have had a lot of success against recently. 2 big wins against them in respective back-to-back seasons. And then, of course, they are struggling right now, coming off of a 3-touchdown loss or so from the Cleveland Browns. So the Bengals now, but they are on a short week. I believe this one's in Tennessee, right? So yeah, so this, short week, you're traveling, all that kind of stuff. But This appears to be a winnable game, as do the next two, which are at Arizona. Again, you're traveling, not great, and then you're home for Seattle right before the bye.
Arizona's kind of sneaky. They just beat
They are
Dallas by I think
sneaky.
10. Yeah, but I mean, we don't have to get into Arizona. I just think it's kind of cool. Like everyone's kind of doubting them, immensely. They think they're going to tank, and then Josh Dobbs comes out of nowhere and looks pretty decent. So that's definitely going to be very interesting if the Bengals are like 1-3 in that game, or if they're 2-2 and they need to get back over 500. But right in front of them is Tennessee, obviously, and there's definitely a confidence in the sense that, okay, they've gone to Tennessee like the past 2 or 3 times and they've won. They seem to have the formula for stopping Derrick Henry. The Browns definitely have the formula for stopping Derrick Henry. I see that game kind of similar to the Rams, where it's an offense that the Bengals should have success in terms of pressuring Tannehill. Andre Dillard at left tackle, he's not having a good year. He just got manhandled by Myles Garrett, so Trey Hendrickson should be favored to win as many times as he did against the Rams. Tannehill is not a quarterback again that handles pressure well. He's kind of like Stafford in that sense. But I think the Titans, like the Rams, can also pop off with a couple of explosive plays. Like the Rams still had success down the field with Tutu and Puka and whatever, and they were still able to generate those explosive plays. And I think the Titans can also kind of do that, but can they generate consistency in their drives? Like I think the Bengals are going to have chances to turn the ball over plenty of times, and it just comes down to how is the Titans' more complete defensive line, how is that going to impact what the Bengals can do offensively? Because Aaron Donald is one thing, right? He's at the end of the day, he's just a man, and he'll get his wins, but he's not going to completely ruin your game at this point in his career. The Titans, like their defensive line's a little bit more complete. They have a little bit more firepower coming off the edge, and that's probably going to make more of a difference against this Bengals offensive line than what the Bengals had to deal with these past couple of weeks. So that's going to be a bigger challenge, but it's going to probably have to be another low-scoring game, which is nothing new in Tennessee.
Yep. Firepower off the edge, yes, but power on the inside with Jeffrey Simmons. He's an animal, man. He's a good player. And when hate to keep banging on Volson in that pass block score, when you see that kind of stuff and some of the pressure kind of coming mostly from the interior this year that has been given up, although it's been a lot less frequent than years past, that worries you a little bit. And then of course, Vrabel comes from the Belichick tree and all of that, where Bill Belichick is really, really good at a lot of different things, and one of which is how his team usually responds after a loss, maybe even a bad loss. And so I think Vrabel has a little bit of that ingrained in his DNA. So this and we know from Mr. Teddy K, given the business to the Titans fans and the players the last time these two teams played, there's a little bit of bad blood here. So this should be an interesting game. I think the Bengals are already favored to win in this one, especially because of what happened with the Titans last week against the Browns. But I don't think this is, while it's a winnable game, and it provides a winnable stretch, or kicks off a winnable stretch, it's not going to be a walk in the park type of game, particularly in their stadium.
No, I mean the Titans, for all their flaws, they still have a pretty decent defense, specifically against the run. I think they're top 5 in terms of EPA allowed against the run. And like you said, Jeffrey Simmons can do just as many things as Aaron Donald can, and Jeffrey Simmons also have more help. But yeah, it's going to be just a classic Bengals Titans game, I think, and we'll see how the injury report kind of shakes out for them. And it's not nothing to say that they're coming off of a bad loss, and they probably want to get that taste out of their mouth for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see. We did get another super chat from Mr. Generosity, aka Mr. Whisper. Thank you so much for that, Tanner Hudson. I think there's some optimism on what he can do. Obviously, he has the size and the hands. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with him going forward, and if he's a guy that can be relied upon at least somewhat consistently in the passing game. And one other thing I was surprised about last week, and I'm wondering what the plan is in the weeks ahead. I guess I'm not surprised in some ways, because it was his first game action of the year and his first game back coming from off of an injury. But I thought we would have seen a little bit more Joseph Osai last night. And so I expect that workload to potentially increase as that ankle continues to get closer and closer to 100%. He was active and got in there a little bit last night, but also Hendrickson and Hubbard were effective anyway with what they were doing. But I just expect him to become a factor, Joseph Osai, as the weeks roll on and potentially in this stretch coming up here.
Yeah, him practicing full for the entire week, I think, created the illusion that he was going to be kind of in his normal workload, but he ended up with 5 snaps. Miles Murphy ended up with 7. So they were dealing with the rotation that they've essentially had for the past couple of weeks, where you've had Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson play the vast majority of the game, which I don't think is ideal, especially towards November and December when you're trying to keep those guys fresh. I would imagine, as Asai just continues to get his feet under him, and same thing with Miles Murphy in that sense, you're going to see more of a balance in that rotation. And obviously, when Trey Hendrickson's playing like he did on Monday night, you don't mind him playing 46 snaps, but you definitely have to be mindful of that as the season goes on for sure.
Yeah. Well, Bengals. Again, I use the term right the ship, and some people are like, I don't know if I saw a comment. I don't know if right the ship is the
staying alive
best. Yeah. I mean, they did what was needed. Let's say that they did what was needed, and what was needed was a win for sure. They improved to 1 and 2, and it's not. They needed that win, John, not just because 0-3. I mean, it's across the board in the division. If you're 0-3 and everyone else is 2-1, you're hurting, man. So I think just from a divisional standpoint and the records across the board, that's what kind of also made this a must win.
Right. Like 0-2 is bad. 0-2 in the division out of the gate is even worse. And that's what made it such a dire situation. And I mean, you have seen though, like the Ravens are definitely vulnerable. Like they're still prone to those kind of off games. We just saw them kind of crap the bed against the Colts there, which was a very interesting game. It was by far the most interesting game that I watched on the Sunday 1 p.m. slate. And the Steelers, I think, are finding themselves a little bit on offense, but I think that's definitely relative compared to how they started there. And you don't know what the Browns are going to look like without Nick Chubb for the entire season. Like Deshaun Watson, not surprised that he played well against an AFC South team. He always made a career off of destroying those bad teams, but that's still very much a mystery, even though we know that defense is legit. So this division race is definitely far from over. And like you said, the Bengals did what they needed to do to make sure that they weren't completely out of it.
Yeah. Well, let's drop the mic and get out of here. You've got a story, I think, that you would like to share, John. Before you do, I guess mine's just a quick mic drop because I want you to have the majority of the floor, because I don't know what you're going to share specifically, but I think what you're going to share is probably going to be something pretty cool. This is just my mic drop is just a comment like this. John Cameron in our YouTube chats, and I love you guys. Love listening to all of your football insights and knowledge. Keep the great job up. I don't do that to pat ourselves on the back type of thing. It's when you receive compliments like that, it like I said, this is a passion project for John and I. We do put a lot of work into it, and we have a lot of fun doing it. We've talked to a lot of cool people. We've met a lot of cool people, be it listeners of our show or otherwise. And so we have a lot of fun with it, but I appreciate that comment, John. I again, not that I'm fishing for compliments type of thing, but when you see that come up with the work that we put in here and the time that we put in, and sometimes we don't have a best show, or at least I don't. You always bring the A game, my friend. I'm like C-. So anyway, it was just a nice comment. I appreciate that, John. Appreciate that.
Thank you, John. Love you, John. Love you too. Great name, by the way. Yeah. Also, love you, Ron Spatola, who was gracious enough to invite me down to another game. We're undefeated watching the game together, and I got the opportunity.
Are you really?
Yeah. I started with
4-0 or 5-0. What are we at here?
Both playoff games. The Dolphins game, we were at the Bills game, unfortunately, so that was canceled. Okay. And then this game, so I think 5-0 now. So yeah, 5-0 nice. With my buddy Ron, section 232. Shout out to him, and he was gracious enough to allow me to invite my friend Sam, who was up from North Carolina. So he visited for the weekend, and Ron also gave me his parking pass, which he parks in like Hilltop or whatever, and. We were looking for parking downtown because we were looking to tailgate with a friend who was tailgating just north of the stadium. But then we figured, okay, well, let's just park at the stadium. Let's just use the parking pass. So we parked there. We met up with our friend. We got into the stadium at like 7:50, I want to say. And I on my phone, like it's on an Apple Wallet, like that's how you like scan your tickets or whatever. So I tried to scan my friend Sam in, and it wasn't working, and I wasn't really sure what was wrong with it. But they just let Sam through because like they just try to keep the line pushing. So they were looking at my phone for like a minute. And they weren't really sure what was wrong with it. They had two guys looking at it. I wasn't sure what was wrong with it. And then they just said, you know, just go in there. Like we can see it's a ticket. It's not working. Whatever. And then I get through the gate and I realized they were trying to scan my parking ticket, not my actual game tickets. So I didn't even need the game tickets to get into the stadium. They tried to scan my parking ticket, and I didn't even realize it until like I just looked at it later. So as I'm walking to our seats, I'm telling Sam what happened, and I'm like distracted by this. I was an inch away from bumping into Willie Anderson. He was just walking the concourse. Yeah, like he was on his way down to the field because there was the whole Ring of Honor thing. So I think, or maybe he was walking his way from up the field. But it's just Willie Anderson, all 6'7" of him, 6'5" of him, just in the concourse. No one seems to care at all. Like apparently I don't care because I'm distracted by my phone and what just happened at the gate. It was Willie Anderson just walking among us. Crazy.
Willie, hard guy to miss. Right, hard guy to miss,
Yeah.
but one of the most beloved guys in Bengals history for sure. The stars were out last night, dude.
Yeah.
Chad brought his family, and it looked like T.O. and TJ were with him.
Marvin
like
was with him.
Other Bengals. Marvin was with him. Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. That was cool. You know, I saw that on the side, and Marvin's yucking it up with Hoosh on the sideline there before the game and stuff. So, I thought that was really cool. Did they, because unfortunately in the telecast, they didn't really get to show much. What were you there in halftime? And, were the two guys honored? Were they chatting? What kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah. I made sure to stay in my seats for that. Like it was Jeff Hobson.
No pee break on that one.
no pee break on that one, but it was it was Jeff Hobson's monologue with like the highlights of both of them, and then it was just the jacket presentation. I think it was, I want to say it was Ken Anderson put the jacket on Boomer.
He did,
and then I forget who put it on.
I think Willie put it on Chad.
Willie put it on Chad, which is pretty cool. So it was cool seeing their names on the Ring of Honor banister kind of unveiled, but they were facing away from us, like they were facing like the other side of the stadium, so we just had to watch on the big board, which was fine, I guess. But yeah, it was really cool to see that. It was, and I mean that's Chad, man. That's the guy I grew up watching, and to see him here and to see him so appreciative of everything, and it clearly means a lot to him. It was really cool to see.
Did he cry? Did we confirm that? He was talking about that on Twitter. Did he end up crying? When he got,
I'm not sure. It was too far away to see that, but yeah, I wouldn't blame him if he did.
Yeah. Well, congrats to both of them. Again, we've talked a lot about those two guys, Boomer and Chad, and what they meant to the organization, what they meant to us. Growing up with the team and watching the team, following the team, and the successes that the team has had when both of them were on the field playing for them. So really cool night. I'm glad you were there to see it in person, John. That's really cool. And a cool story about Willie Anderson. We had him on the show years and years ago. We got to try and get him back on. He is awesome. And hopefully, if and when we get him on, we're talking about him making a solid and deserved Hall of Fame push for sure, because he is a deserving player. But that's going to do it for us. John Sheeran, thank you, sir. Glad you had a good time last night. And thank you to all of the live listeners. Appreciate all the comments, interactions, and tuning in 2 nights in a row. We'll be back Thursday with more, including a Titans preview going forward and other opinions, analysis, all that good stuff. So once again, if you can, please subscribe to the Cincy Jungle podcast channel through your favorite audio streamer, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. Go get the channel through any real major podcast platform. Give us a subscribe on the YouTube channel. Give a thumbs up to the Cincy Jungle Facebook page. Keep it to both cincyjungle.com and A to Z sports.com to get your Bengals news fix. We'll be back later this week. John, take care, buddy. I'll see you in a couple days as we process and continue to soak in the Bengals' first win of the season.
Talk to you guys soon.
All right, see ya.